We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Valerie Jackson. She is the Chief Diversity Officer at Zuora. Valerie, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Sure. Well, sure to all of it. Hello. Yes, I am Valerie Jackson every day. I am the Chief Diversity Officer at Zuora. You got my pronouns right. I use she, her, although I will respond to feminine and neutral pronouns because I love a good neutral pronoun. So what did I want to be when I was a kid?
Yep.
So I don't know if you ever played a game called Three Wishes, where if I had three wishes, what would I wish for? And you can't wish for the wishes, right? So I would, I don't know, wish for something like more toys or unlimited food or something like that. And then my most important wish was always to be able to speak all of the human and animal languages, to be able to end conflict and bring all of the species together.
I love that. I come to think of it, I have played that game before. And when I play with other people, sometimes they say, I want 3 more wishes, which is funny. But I love that. If you fast forward to today, you are, Chief Diversity Officer at Zuora. How has your personal journey really led you up until this point in your kind of professional career?
Well, my journey has definitely been a winding road. Although I think that my initial dream to bring people together and then my subsequent professional desire to become a diplomat is alive and well in what I do today, because at my core, I try and be one of the threads that weaves people together. Mm-hmm. And my personal why for being on the planet is helping people find or create happiness and success, ideally on their terms. And so if I am able to help you see something in yourself, help you connect to a part of yourself or to someone else or to something, whether it's purpose, meaning, a great company, that brings me joy.
I love that. I appreciate that you shared your personal why too. I think that's really related to kind of what we talked about earlier as well, in terms of all of the incredible work that you do and people in this space, in terms of ensuring that folks are happy in their kind of lives. And a lot of our lives are spent working, and just this reflection point of how are we spending our time working 40 plus hours, and in terms of product and innovation, but also the talent space too. How do you think about incorporating design thinking and inclusive design into the kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion space? And can you give an example of what that looks like in practice for folks who perhaps aren't familiar with kind of design thinking?
Sure. So I leverage design thinking really to help me create solutions and opportunities that bring people closer to happiness, a good experience. And design thinking is a series of, usually it's the accepted 5 stages of design thinking that people most leverage, which are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Mm-hmm. I tend to call empathize in my head, listen to understand. Mm-hmm. And so in my shorthand, I'll often call this the listen stage. And I leverage design thinking to build everything, whether it's a talent process or my entire strategy, right? So for an example, and I am not an engineer or a designer by nature, I'm actually a lawyer, but I heard or learned about design thinking many, many years ago, and it just felt right because it gives us a window into how people are experiencing what we build. Mm-hmm. And in the people and culture space, I'm building for you, right? So why am I not going to find out how it's affecting you, whether you like it, whether it resonates? Anywho, okay. So when I joined Zuora in human time, it was about 1.5 years ago, but COVID time is special. So it feels like shorter and longer at the same time. So when I joined Zuora, I first made sure to schedule one-on-ones with like 120 some odd people as soon as possible, which roughly equated to almost 15% of the company at the time, because I wanted to make sure that I had a good foundation of information and data points to leverage. And so that was my like empathize or listen stage. I met with people in all roles, at all levels, all different geographies, to listen, to understand, right? To really define what it is they're experiencing, and also take a crack at defining some hypotheses of what I could build to help either support them or solve for something that would improve their experience. And then the ideation is the brainstorming, right? So I'm a really creative person, which took me a long time to like realize. But anyway, so I love to create, brainstorm, whatever you want to call it, on my own, because I'm an introvert. So I tend to do my best thinking in here by myself. And then I move on to prototype, right? So I actually, within my first, I think, couple months here, built a draft framework based on all of the learnings I gathered from listening to people, and framework, strategy, goals, the whole 9 yards. And I then went to pressure test it, right, with so many different types of people to see, does this resonate with who we are and with who we want to be? Does it make sense, right? Does this excite and energize and inspire you or not, right? And so then I take their feedback and then I iterate. And our whole team lives in the stages of design thinking, depending on what we're working on. And it's energizing. It keeps things fresh, for sure. And it also ensures that we are constantly sourcing feedback and using our end users, our people, data and experience to always inform what we build.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like end users of talent and organization are so important, and iterating on ideas, especially if they're not perfect yet, trial and error, innovation. That's something that we're seeing across the board, especially over the past 3 years as well, because we've had to adapt. And going along the same lines of thinking about end users and kind of that product analogy and engineering, or on the tech side of things, we talk about this quote unquote tech debt. And you chip away at it. In our previous conversations, we discussed something similar in terms of culture debt, or process debt, diversity debt, things of that nature. Can you talk about what you mean when you mentioned that? Because I thought that was particularly something that not a lot of folks talk about, but it highly impacts the organization, similarly to the tech and engineering side.
100%. So, well, tech debt is, I guess, simply put, when we have built something where we tended to index for speed and delivery over perhaps more time and higher quality. And we eventually get to a point where we kind of have to reverse engineer or sort of mine that debt in order to shore up the strength of what we build, right? Well, ditto for cultures and organizations. You can be building indexing for speed, right? Let's ship it, let's build it, let's run fast and break things and build the plane in the air. But then you get 1 year, 5 years, 500 people down the line, and you realize, hopefully you realize, that what you built and how you built actually isn't strong enough in the right ways to support all the people you want and all the things that you want to accomplish. And so then you're faced with the opportunity to go back and re-engineer, right? Which is often more challenging than just building right the first time. So that's what I mean by culture debt or process debt, when we don't have the right or enough processes in order to sustain the objective decisions that we want to make that inspire trust. And I know in some places process is a dirty word. And as a corporate lawyer, a capital market securities lawyer, I love structure. So I'm like, let's process this. And people were like, no, please. But here's the thing. We are humans. We are not perfect. I don't believe perfection exists, but that's a whole different conversation. And when our brains dive into something, we are bringing with us all sorts of unknown decision-making tools, including biases and processes inclusively built are actually one of the best ways to mitigate bias in decision making, not eradicate, because you can't eradicate bias because the brain will always have biases, period. But we can mitigate the heck out of them and we can control for their impact, right? So I don't even remember what your question was, but I was off to the races.
No.
I'm a little passionate. What can I say?
You're totally good. You talked about the culture debt, the process debt, diversity debt. I definitely don't think that process is a bad thing at all. I mean, we talk about a lot on reimagining company culture too, operationalizing equity, making sure that everybody feels like they can change things in their process because everything can, be iterated on. You can hear more voices, and just make sure that, you have folks at the table when you're making these decisions in terms of, design thinking and processes. Can you share an example? I'm sure there are many of how you've worked with teams at Zuora, redesigned a process to be more equitable recently, or one that comes top of mind.
Oh, so lots of examples. And I'm thrilled to say that because our HR team, also known as CEO Success, is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Enthusiastic about ensuring that we have the right structures, the right processes, built the right way, designed for us, right? For our people and our incredibly open and engaged partners who always want to loop me in, even before we have a process. Right. How can we build this better, right? And also, how can we evaluate this and tweak and iterate? And that's really important. It's an important mindset to have, first of all. And I'm very glad that our CEO Success team, CEO is what we call our employees, because every employee is the CEO of their career. And our company is Zuora, starts with a Z. So we are ZEOs. Yes. And CEO Success is built for the success of our people. And the open-minded mindset, like we can build better, is not a given everywhere. Our teams have it. And it's really important for me because my function, the D&I function, is actually in the CEO's organization. We're not part of HR. And so anytime you've ever worked with another department, cross-functionally, there's always the possibility that you won't align, you won't, have all of the communication channels open that you need. And our teams work together splendidly, which is, knock on wood, how it's supposed to go everywhere all the time. I'm very thankful for how enthusiastic and engaged they are in the concept of inclusive design for process design and building, because it's not a given everywhere. And so that's just one example. Let's call it a micro example of a process or a way that we're approaching rebuilding or editing our processes so that they are more inclusively designed. And that means that we are centering arguably the most vulnerable people who might experience or be affected by that process, and ensuring that the process is built on fair, objective, communicated criteria, so that no matter who you are or what you need to leverage the process for, right, you can understand how the process works, what good is, because the criteria are laid out for you, and you are supported in making those fair, objective decisions. And then there are other little sort of tweaks that we can make. It doesn't always take an entire process. Sometimes it is a process interrupter, or simply, if we're going to use product language, a feature. So, for example, one thing we did this year that changed the game was make captioning a best practice for our internal and external video-based events.
Love it.
And we have employees in 20 countries, right? So we have a lot of folks for whom English is like their third language, their eighth language. And then we have folks like me who are hearing impaired. And then there are folks who learn better by reading as opposed to hearing, right? So no matter how you learn, hear, or don't, or process language, you have a tool that helps you ensure that you're getting more information out of what's happening. And there's no way that you're going to feel truly connected to your company if you literally don't know what's going on.
Right.
And it was a game changer, so simple for folks to implement. I've heard folks now do that with customers, and their customers are appreciative, and they're like, yeah, Like who doesn't want to look good and take care of their customer at the same time?
Yes.
And we're thankful that there are tools like Zoom. We're grateful to have them as a great customer. Tools like Zoom that actually provide captioning as a normal feature that we can leverage easily.
Absolutely. There are changes that you can make tomorrow as well to be more inclusive in our everyday decisions too. People are change agents, and it doesn't matter where you sit in the organization, what department, you have the opportunity to really create equitable kind of processes and changes. When you're making any kind
100%.
of changes, whether it's processes or behaviors or, everyone's going to they want to have a conversation around it, and there'll be positive feedback, negative feedback, anything in between. And it's part of that kind of two-way mutual conversation. How do you see kind of the impact of employee feedback management as, something to provide that culture of trust? And how do you see that trust manifesting at Zuora overall, outside of your team and just at the organization at large?
Trust is everything. If you don't have trust as an employee, if you don't trust your company, if your company doesn't trust you, if you don't trust your colleagues and vice versa, if you don't have trust, you don't have anything. And this goes for an individual or a team. There are people like Patrick Lencioni who've written so many books on the importance of trust as a foundational element for high-performing teams. So one way we earn trust is by aligning what we say and what we do. So Will Anastas, the CRO at Conviva, a former colleague of mine, wise, wonderful soul, talks about the say-do ratio. Does what you say align with what you do? Because when it does, you inspire trust. And when you align your say-do ratio over and over and over again, your consistency also inspires trust. So asking for feedback, whether it's in listening groups or surveys or AllVoices, which we are currently onboarding, right? Or even in stay interviews. I'm gonna say that again, stay interviews, do them, very important. Okay, cannot emphasize enough. No matter how you are asking for feedback, what we do with it demonstrates whether people should take the time to give that feedback, because feedback is a gift. Doesn't always feel like a gift when you get it, but it's a gift. And when we take that feedback and we do something with it over and over again, then we're demonstrating that we value your feedback. When we take their feedback and we treat it with the respect and sometimes confidentiality that it deserves, then we show folks that we are earning their respect and providing a safe space for them to give their feedback. No one's going to speak up if they don't feel comfortable or safe doing so. So it's rinse and repeat over and over again. And we're fortunate to have a super high participation rate in our employee surveys, because folks want to let us know how they experience our company. And we are so thankful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Trust is a pivotal foundation for all of these conversations, and really that accountability piece of saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, even if you can't make a change tomorrow or something can happen, just that acknowledgement piece is really important. And you mentioned a variety of different ways to get that feedback. Again, every person is different, so not everyone at the organization is going to feel comfortable speaking up in an all hands or speaking to the chief diversity officer at an organization too. But I think that makes sense. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier in terms of, sometimes feedback doesn't feel like a gift at the time because it's critical or hard. And I can definitely relate to that. Do you have any advice for us to something you mentioned in our previous conversation too, was coming back to humanity while we're having really hard conversations with each other and critical feedback? Yeah. What does that mean?
So, there's so much in that question. So first of all, when I think of coming back to humanity, I mean, grounding ourselves both in our humanness, which means our imperfections, our aspirations, and sometimes limitations, and also recognizing the humanity or humanness in others. And this could be everything from having empathy to giving the feedback that needs to be delivered for someone to grow. That is a gift. If you withhold feedback because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings or you don't want them to be angry at you, etc., you are robbing them of the opportunity to learn something that could help you grow. Conversely, if someone offers you feedback and you don't want to take it, then that's a gift that you're not going to receive because you're not listening. If you are giving feedback, asking if folks want it can kind of help let you know whether that door is open or it's slammed shut. If it's open and you are going to give feedback, I would encourage everyone to remember the words of Brené Brown. Clear is kind.
Mm-hmm.
Clear feedback. How you deliver it definitely matters, right? Clear and direct can sometimes hurt. Clear and empathetic might sting a little less.
Mm-hmm.
Clear and consistent, always a great idea. But remember, when you are conversing with anyone, whether you're giving feedback or you're simply asking, how are you doing? Starting with empathy, I mean, there's a reason why it's the first stage in design thinking, okay?
Yes.
Many great things start with empathy. And if empathy is not a state of being that is available to you, try compassion.
Mm-hmm.
However you go, starting with a desire to help, leading with love, you can't go too wrong.
Absolutely. Reflect on that, ask yourselves these big questions. And then again, it comes back to that intention of just like wanting to have this conversation with someone else and also wanting to actively listen to someone providing you this gift of feedback. We've also talked about, the importance of building a company, an organization, a microcosm of society, if you will, with intentions. How do you think about measuring employee happiness based on those intentions? Of course, knowing, just like regular happiness, you can't be happy all the time, but how do you think about that?
100%. Actually, that's a great point. So we often leverage surveys and feedback tools to glean how folks are feeling at any point in time. Mm-hmm. If you ask me if I'm happy at 8:30 in the morning on a Monday versus 1 p.m. on a Friday, you are very likely to get very different answers.
Absolutely.
So there is like a survey science, right, to consider. But also, it's important for us to remember that we can be happy with a lot of things or happy with just one thing. And all of the above can influence our experience, right? So for instance, surveys are often a great tool of employee happiness. However, they tend to be lagging indicators, right? Real-time feedback tools like AllVoices can give you a great idea of how happy people are, but only those who leverage the tool, right? And so then you have something called stay interviews. Heard of them? Stay interviews are a fantastic way to find out how your people are doing. And there are actually questions you can ask where people will give you the answers that will help you be a better leader, be a better team member, and design a better experience for everyone. One question I learned from my direct reports is, what helps you thrive? And bonus point, stay interviews are a great place to deliver upward feedback. Great place to receive upward feedback. So if I'm asking what would help you thrive, and to be honest, what would help you thrive is me giving you better, more consistent feedback, but you kind of don't want to tell me that you could improve how you give feedback. You could say, you know what, I thrive when I get clear, consistent feedback that is just in time and related to what I do. Mm-hmm. Right? And so great opportunities. And some folks use things like turnover or like retention rates or attrition rates to gauge employee happiness. And I actually don't think it's an accurate measure. First of all, it's lagging, right? But second of all, I could be super happy with everything except a relationship, a key relationship, or a new team member, or some other thing, right? And so if I leave because I have an opportunity to get all the things that I need and want in one place, was it that I was unhappy here? I was actually happy with a whole lot of things, but I didn't have everything I needed to thrive. And so that's how I sort of distinguish. But real-time data over time, fantastic. And I love data. You can't go wrong leveraging data.
Data is important, and we've been hearing more and more about stay interviews and the questions that you ask folks, and making sure you are, again, capturing that feedback before they're ending their time at the organization, or it's too late to do anything about that feedback too, and actively listen. In terms of like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging space, I think it's great that we're seeing more roles available at large size companies, small size like organizations, hyper growth companies. Really put an emphasis on this is someone's full-time job, to really focus on that. It's not only this person's job, obviously, but it's like a full-time job in itself with everything that needs to be done. And I want to ask, from your experience, do you think it's important for folks in the kind of equity space to really identify as part of a historically marginalized group and have that personal lived experience?
So just as you have so many different ways to approach DEI work based on the practitioner, I'm sure you'll get a whole lot of different answers to this question.
Absolutely.
Personally, I do not think a particular identity, community, experience is required to do this work. I do think that an open mind, an open heart, open ears, and some thick skin are prerequisites for doing this work. We all have had different paths bring us to this work, and we'll all have different ways of leaning in and leveraging our lived experiences to create and complete this work, right? My personal approach is that I am working for every human in our ecosystem, because I believe that every single human needs to feel like we matter, like we belong, like we are validated. And we spend most of our time at work, so we often look for it from our work experiences. But I don't think that is only true for some humans. Based on human psychology, it's true for every human. Now, how we look for validation, why we look for certain indicators of belonging, how we feel are so different across the spectrum. But everyone needs to belong. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone yearns for dignity.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we want to know not just that we matter, but at our core that we are loved.
I mean,
and people demonstrate that love through their behaviors, our words, our actions, what we build, all of it.
Absolutely. I have asked this question to a lot of different DEI practitioners on this show, and just out of curiosity for myself too. And everybody has said a little something similar in terms of, no, there's no prerequisite for this lived experience, but having an open mind, being a great listener, having like this growth sense of, I don't know everything, but I'm going to do my best to, like, the impact versus intention conversation is really important. So I definitely appreciate your response to that question as well. In terms of, I know I've asked a lot of specific questions around your work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the strategies you've implemented at Zuora and how you continue to help people thrive at the company. But if you were to say, what's a current problem you're trying to solve, what would it be?
Sleep.
Sleep.
I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. Sleep.
How's that going?
I have been focused on work and work goals since I was 14 years old. And now, next month, I will be 40. Well, by the time this airs, I will have just turned 42. Yeah. In human years. I don't know what that means in COVID time.
Yeah.
And I am now just starting to make human goals, life goals, joy goals, as important, if not more important, than career goals. So there's a whole lot out here at work to solve, right? To improve, to celebrate. But real talk, I'm trying to work on some sleep and being whole, feeling whole, so that I can create space for others to do the same.
I think that's a key part of it too, not only to prevent yourself from burning out as well, but seeing, okay, Valerie's taking time to sleep well at, in the evening, and she's not pinging me at midnight, and just she's having this whole whole person conversations with us, that modeling behavior really impacts how people show up day to day, how much of themselves they do want to bring to work. So I think that is important. Also, February 2022, I definitely want to ask how kind of Zuora is honoring and celebrating Black History Month this year.
So February is Black History Month in the US and Canada. And we celebrate Black History Month, not just in February, but also in October when it's Black History Month in UK, Ireland, and then the Netherlands. So starting off in February, our theme is subscribe to Black excellence, because Zuora subscriptions, it's a thing. Black excellence, also a thing.
Yes.
And our Zuora Black Network came up with that theme, and who doesn't love it? So that's our theme. And our focus is actually going to be Black health and wellness.
I love that.
And so, right? Also very timely. And it was important for our employees, especially our Zuora Black Network members, that what we focus on be uplifting and positive and encouraging. And so we, the D&I team, are working on really delivering content that's and experiences that'll not just engage and excite and inspire, but also educate. Everything we do, we seek to educate and help you feel something at the same time, because we learn better when we feel something. So I'm very excited.
I love that. I love that theme. I love that you have employee resource groups at Zuora as well, which is awesome. They are part of the conversation too. So everybody is participating in ideas. Valerie, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or maybe, one or two key takeaways that you hope people bring with them after hearing our conversation today? And for myself, just plus one to really bring empathy into leadership, really thinking about being equitable in all of your processes. Definitely want to ask you.
This was me introverting. I'm thinking hard. Was there anything you didn't ask? Well, I'm sure there are lots of things you didn't ask because we only had 45 minutes. We could talk for days.
Yes.
One thing that I think is really important and has sometimes, without me realizing it, informed my work, but now that I'm working to be more cognizant, it's definitely present for me. Not just my personal why, which I encourage everyone to identify and leverage in their work, whether it's work you get paid for or not. Also, your personal values are so impactful and important because they can help us decide what to put energy toward and how. And in this work in particular, focusing on people and culture, whatever the title is, it's some hard work. It's rewarding work, but it's hard work.
Yeah.
And knowing how, where, when to lean in, to pivot, to give and devote, to retreat and restore, all of these things can be influenced by your values and your decisions. And knowing your values is that first step. So I would ask you, do you know what your values are? And if you don't, I would encourage you to find them out, uncover them.
I love that. I think that is a good call to action to end on, and something that I was thinking about the other day too, because people have been asking recently, what are your values? How do they align with what you do, your actions every day? So Valerie, I definitely appreciate the time you took and just kind of sharing your experience and insights with me today on reimagining company culture. I enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. And I'm serious, Christina, your values.
Your values.
I know you probably know them, even if you haven't named them. They might be right under the surface. If you have named them, brava.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like my values, if I narrowed it down to 3, are really empathy, as you were talking about, effective communication. And I'm going to say one of my values, which you mentioned, kind of joy goals, and this is what we thought of it, is joy. Because I think that, we only have one life, and joy should be part of something that you hold internally, but also that you think about when you're communicating with others, because, that joy is important in life.
I totally agree. And I'm biased. I'm outing myself as biased because joy is one of my values.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
I know, right? It's also one of my names. I was fortunate enough to be born to parents who gave me names that, without my realizing it, were paths to follow in this life, and
Mm,
ended up being my values. And so, actually, three names. So, my values are love,
love.
joy, courage. And those are my three names, not necessarily in order, the meanings of my names.
Yeah.
And then family and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And my family is everything. Love, joy, and courage are how I seek to walk in the world. That was ableist. Be in the world.
Yeah.
And integrity just reminds me of what my dad used to teach me. Your word is your bond. Without your word, you've got nothing, because it's trust. Without trust, what do we have? So I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. We're all a work
Said
in
that
progress.
we're working on it. I think that's all we can ask, and really recenter that too. Valerie, thank you for reconnecting today.
Thank you so much. This was so wonderful. Appreciate it.
I enjoyed it as well. It was a super energizing conversation. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management and two-way conversation as a requirement for the organization to succeed overall. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is reflecting on their personal values.
Hear, hear.